Welcome to this online lecture. I am Cynthia de Giorgio and I am the curator of St. John's Co-Cathedral. My talk today is going to be titled In Search of Caravaggio. Caravaggio's personality has remained both intriguing and elusive. Although Caravaggio can never be fully understood because most of what he did was lost in time, some hints why Caravaggio's behavior was so erratic could be found in his roots, where he was brought up. The socio-religious environment that he grew up in shaped him into the turbulent person that he was, and the artist capable of visualizing electrifying images. Caravaggio painted with darkness and light. His paintings have moments of extreme agonizing human experiences, faces that are brightly lit but threatened to be obliterated by the pools of darkness that lurk in the background. One such image is his famous painting, The Martyrdom of St. John the Baptist, in the Oratory at St. John's Co-Cathedral, where I stand before you. Besides his harsh realistic rendering of events, which was the most novel aspect of his paintings, he also reveals much about his personality. His treatment of the scene is a perfect example, and we will see why that is. Caravaggio's early years are the least documented part of his life. He was born in 1571 in Milan and spent most of his early years in Caravaggio with his family. At the young age of 13, he signed a 4-year contract with a painter, Simone Peterzano, in Milan. But by the age of 20, he was in Rome. The artist's 3 early biographers, Giulio Mancini, Giovanni Baglioni, and Giovanni Pietro Bellori, offer glimpses of his time in the Eternal City. Mancini made a vital mention about his background, stating that Caravaggio was of honorable citizenship and that his father was major domo and architect to the Marchese di Caravaggio. This could account for Caravaggio's belief that he was from high society standing, thus deserving respect for this account alone. His elevated sense of status could be the root of many of his future troubles. Caravaggio's biographer, Bellori, wrote about Caravaggio's talent, but criticized him severely, stating that he could only imitate nature and lacked invenzione, decorum, and disegno, which shows little understanding of Caravaggio's intent. Baglioni, on the other hand, wrote mostly about Caravaggio's trouble with the law and fall from grace. But what is known about Caravaggio's early childhood comes from the criminal archives in both Rome and Malta. His violent nature was recorded in the many skirmishes that he had with the law. And through these documents, we get a glimpse of him and his personality. His violent experiences were often reflected in his extremely accurate paintings of gruesome details. And this is what makes his work so interesting. But I'm going to go back a little bit to his early life. During Caravaggio's childhood, Milan was on the frontier of the torn Christian world, between the Protestant reformers and the Catholic reformers. The most influential personality in Milan at that time was Carlo Borromeo, who was the Archbishop of Milan. Like Savonarola before him, he denounced wealth and preached to the population of Milan to purge their sins through punishments. Carlo Borromeo's dark ascetic teachings reveal a tough, adamant reformer of Catholicism, who believed that human nature was tainted by sin. The Borromean experience was meant to have an almost brainwashing effect that went far afield from Milan and intended to create a guilt-ridden society, made to feel lacking in spiritual purity and correct virtues. His sermons had a profound hold on the population of the city where Caravaggio spent his childhood, and surely his steely control would have had a tremendous effect on the fertile imagination of the would-be artist. Caravaggio's sense of doom is witnessed in an account by the Messinese writer Francesco Susino. One day he went into the church of Madonna of Pilero, he writes, where he was offered some holy water. Caravaggio asked what it was for and was told to cancel venial sins. "Then it is of no use to me, because mine are all mortal," he said. The terse remarks reveals the darkness of his psyche. and his conviction that nothing could ever wash his soul clean, and certainly not holy water. He then experienced the horrors of the plague epidemic that broke out in 1576, witnessing the death of his father Fermo and grandfather and several other members of his family. Borromeo was quick to condemn the Milanese, that the plague was a curse from God for neglecting their souls. The quasi-hysterical spirituality pervading Milan in the last decades of the 16th century seemed to be the root of Caravaggio's bleak view of life. The content of Borromeo's preaches show that he had studied the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, a work that emphasized the role of visualization in Christian meditation. His faith harbored a form of piety that was intense, intrinsically sensual and emotional. Worshippers were encouraged to visualize martyrdom scenes and to empathize with their suffering. This called for a mental process that was identical to that required in the process of making paintings. The encouragement of this form of popular devotion was closely linked to the development of painting. These events had an influence on the development of imagery, and soon after, art was transformed to reflect the circumstances. Till the end of the 16th century, art had developed into a refined form of idealized expressions, using a language to entertain those of higher thought in the courts of the High Renaissance. But after the reformers of the Council of Trent, artists were now being encouraged, according to the last session in 1563, to use more realistic depictions. It was now the job of art to educate spectators and move them to penance. In the aftermath of the Council of Trent, Caravaggio was a single artist who radically changed the course of painting. The art he went on to create could hardly have been more closely aligned to the beliefs and the sensibilities of the Archbishop of Milan. His unique ability to visualize human suffering is detected in his tactile feeling for flesh and blood. He turned out to be the most gifted artist in representing unprecedented, stark realism, deeply attuned to the ideals of the Counter-Reformation piety that blanketed the city of his youth. The more sophisticated artistic circles regarded the idea of appealing to popular taste with disdain. The intelligentsia, on the other hand, found it intriguing. It is for this reason that Caravaggio's art found two extreme reactions: those who loved it and those who hated it. Caravaggio's reinvention of religious painting would take place in Rome and not in Milan. After arriving there at around 1592, he painted genre pictures of card shops and young musicians. There was a marked development in Caravaggio's iconography. He knew that reality was not in the fine courts of the dukes, but in the back streets of Rome. It was the dangers of street life that ordinary people experienced that fueled his realism. One leap in this direction was the shocking rendition of human suffering depicted in the painting of Santa Maria del Popolo in Rome that depicts St. Peter looking in horror at his hand being nailed to the cross. The violence in the streets of Rome, the dueling and the street brawls, his affairs with courtesans, especially Philidel, clearly indicate his unruly nature. After dueling with Ranuccio Tomisoni and killing him, whilst attempting to castrate him for sleeping with Philidel, he was forced to flee Rome and to go to Naples. He was now a fugitive with a bando capitale for his head. It was from here that he came to Malta. The knight's chivalrous reputation after the Great Siege of 1565 had caused resounding fame across Europe. Surely the opportunity to escape his terrible past and start a new chapter on an island fortress that seemed to offer him both safety and stability was not to be missed. Caravaggio's Maltese period, therefore, is directly linked to the Knights of Malta. Within the order were patrons that knew of his radical artistic reformation, daring iconography, but also knew about his colorful past. The circumstances that led him to Malta from Naples and his Maltese 15-month stay are well documented. When Caravaggio walked through the streets of Valletta towards St. John's Church on a hot summer's day in July 1607, surely the bright sunlight caused him to squint. As he stepped into the church, he would have been struck with the cool ambience and the contrast of the dark interior that blinded him temporarily as his eyes adjusted. As he gazed around the church, he would have observed the plain, unadorned interior. His perception to the contrast of light and dark, as he was ushered into the oratory, would have fueled his interest in chiaroscuro. This is where he would produce his masterpiece, the Martyrdom of St. John the Baptist, painted as the altarpiece of this oratory, was probably given as his passaggio, which was the gift a knight was expected to give to the order when he was admitted as a member. Since the signature Fra indicates that he was already a knight, the canvas could have been completed soon after his investiture on 14th July 1608, and was most likely planned to be unveiled on the 29th of August, on the feast of the martyrdom of St. John the Baptist. During that time, the oratory was a plain room, and the enormous painting that filled the wall must have had a tremendous impact on those entering the bare chamber. Caravaggio's painting of the martyrdom is both gruesome and fatalistic. His gloomy formation in Milan and the violence he experienced in Rome fueled this stark realism, and intuitively led him to represent the agonizing human experience of death by beheading with clarity. Deliberately, he heightens the execution by lighting up the horrid actions of the event. They are clear and complete, except for the detachment of the head from the neck. This is the precise moment he preserves, creating a suspense that captures the spectator's attention. Then we see the juxtaposition of contrasting characters that fit like a jigsaw puzzle in shape, but are also ill at ease in type and personality. And this shows his remarkable choice of iconography. Although the figures form a circle, leaving a space for the viewer to participate, none of the characters make any eye contact amongst themselves nor with the viewer. They operate in silent detachment. The viewer is in fact an intruder to the scene, caught witnessing the horrendous execution. The beheading of St. John takes place in a prison courtyard. Dragged out of his prison cell to be executed at the command of the Petrarch Herod to satisfy Salome's wish, the executioner holds the saint's head pressed against the ground. The throat has already been slit. He now stands over John, reaching out for the dagger, and grasp the hair to better reveal the neck and finish off the job. The cold detached janitor gives instructions. The blade of the sword gleams in the foreground, demanding attention for the service it has rendered. The young maid impassively holds out the basin to reveal the head. The old maid clasps her head, covering her ears to block out the sound of tearing flesh and crushing bones. She is the only person who displays some form of emotions. Then, two prisoners look out intently, contemplating their own faith. Caravaggio exquisitely paints the janitor's keys in great detail. Caravaggio rarely wasted time painting irrelevant details. In this painting, and the only reason why he paid so much attention to the keys is because he wanted to give them a symbolic significance. These are the keys that had imprisoned him, and these are the keys that will free him in death. In contrast to his Roman paintings, here he uses foreground leisurely, and his figures fit comfortably into the picture plane. Gone away are the features leaping out of the picture plane. Gone are the diagonal forms, which he so often used to destabilize a composition that had become his Roman trademark. There is a sense of contemplative approach to painting. Also new is a restricted palette of earth colors, reserving cardinal red for the Baptist cloak. Although known for his violent temper, Caravaggio seems to control the extreme violent actions with classic order. The drama takes place on the left side of the composition, following the golden rule with perfection. From the blood gushing out of the Baptist's throat, Caravaggio writes his name. This is not the first time that he identified himself with the victim. His sense of persecution and fixation on death is also found in the previous works, such as his self-portrait of St. Francis in Connecticut and Goliath in the painting of David and Goliath in Madrid. What causes Caravaggio to sign the painting seems to lie in his need to verify his knighthood. His only qualifying virtue for having joined an order of blue bloods was on merit of his art alone. His signature affirms his new status as brother in one of the most powerful orders. The signature also reveals his competitive spirit as he flaunts his title as Fra. Through his signature in blood, Caravaggio even seems to have the audacity to draw his bloodline from the descendants of the order's martyred patron saints, and was reborn again as a knight through his precious blood. This is based on the notion that the beginning of the 17th century had that martyrdoms were perceived as a rebirth through death. Caravaggio knew that sacrifice was part of the spiritual culture of the knights. Spargere sangue per la religione were words Grand Master Alof de Wignacourt frequently used in his diplomatic correspondence. This is significantly seen in the context that Grand Master Wignacourt had gone through great lengths to get Caravaggio knighted by writing to Pope Paul V to gain special dispensation and allow him to knight the painter and secure a waiver, since murderers were a status that was prohibited. Surely, among some of the knights, this would have brought about some feelings of disdain. He could now not only carry a sword, but walk through the streets of Valletta with feelings of pride and vindication. His signature is a demonstration of the power of his art. By now, Caravaggio had become a master at diabolic creativity, and it was the shocking element that made him so famous. In the case of the martyrdom, he found a new way of putting himself in the picture, and instead writes his name in the blood that is gushing from St. John's neck. Considering that signatures were rare in the early 17th century, Caravaggio's placement of the signature is almost pathological. The well-crafted graffiti style of the signature, where he is both a participant and a spectator of the execution, where his physical presence is still felt in the hurried and uneven brushstrokes. St. John's martyrdom is one of the most sensitive and yet unsympathetic interpretations of a man brutally executed. There is no indication of salvation or reward for the saint's martyrdom. There are no halos or angels holding palm fronds for St. John as a symbol of his martyrdom. There is no divine intervention and no sign of redemption. It is the hopelessness of the event that makes this work pungently a depiction of human suffering. The absence of emotion to such a brutal scene is telling of Caravaggio's sense of human destiny. Caravaggio no doubt suffered from existential problems, and the purpose of human existence obviously haunted him. Caravaggio is best known for his realism. Yet the martyrdom scene is infused with a refined theatrical element that is far from realistic. The protagonists stand in the foreground, almost motionless. Selective lighting defines the play of light across silk, iron, and skin. These pure theatrical elements make the painting seem like the opening scene of a theatrical performance. Standing in front of the martyrdom is like sitting in the front row. The lights have gone down, the curtains have opened, and Spotlit is a drama that feels intensely real. In this painting, Caravaggio makes use of a special three-dimensional effect to break down the divide and invading the spectator's personal space, forcing both physical as well as mental involvement. Now in his artistic language is the daring rapid brushwork and the use of a reddish plain background with figures highlighted with such force that the painting still holds the freshness of a newly painted canvas. When Caravaggio finished painting the martyrdom of St. John the Baptist, It was probably the last painting that he executed on the island and the last time that he held a brush here. On August 18th, 1608, possibly only a few days after he had signed his painting, Caravaggio got involved in a serious fight in Valletta, where a senior knight was seriously wounded that led to his arrest. His subsequent escape from Fort St. Angelo, where he was imprisoned, had a disastrous outcome, whereby he was defrocked and expelled from the order. This ceremony was held in the Oratory in the presence of the Venerable Council, which comprised several of his patrons, in front of the martyrdom of St. John the Baptist, the work that he had proudly and perhaps even defiantly signed Fra Michelangelo. Malta, that had been his pathway to freedom, had him on the run once more. His masterpiece, uncannily, seems to reflect his life events, a series of flashing lights, moments that occur in the shadows caught by chance in a beam of light, heading for stardom one day and fleeing the next. The predicament of his life experience induced Caravaggio to paint a mix of pessimistic and violent scenes. This was his commitment to painting, that he perceived as true. His paintings and his ability to address and control the spectator, to stop time and to create visual and emotional paradoxes was his hallmark. After Caravaggio, art was never the same again.